You know, as a physician, it pains me to acknowledge that I think a big part of the problem is physician prescribing habits. And I think those were also influenced by some misinformation from the drug companies on the idea that OxyContin wasn't that addictive. That turned out to be maybe just a little bit untrue. I think that when we look at prescribing habits and we look at changing, we've got to look at, you know, we've been talking about this, and in Kentucky we've done some good things. We closed down some of the pill mills. We got rid of some of the, you know, by checking prescriptions to make sure people weren't doctor shopping and duplicating. But we still have a county that has 21,000 people in it that had 2.8 million doses of OxyContin prescribed. OxyContin and Percocet, I lumped them all together. That's 150 doses for every person who lives in the county. So something's wrong. And we think we've gotten rid of the worst doctors that were out there doing it, and this still occurs. So something's wrong in our habits. And, you know, from when I went to medical school, and this is sort of the conundrum, doctors don't want people to hurt. You know, I recently was a victim of an assault and had 6 ribs broken, and I was given, I was given opioids of some sort. And I finally made the decision just not to take them. Not because I was worried that I was addicted, although I was going to need 4 to 6 weeks of them, but I took large doses of ibuprofen, and people were like, oh, well, ibuprofen's Advil, that's no good. Well, it does control pain. I still had a lot of pain, but I mean, I did get some relief with ibuprofen, but people think, oh, it's not good enough because it's not a narcotic. And I just don't think we've studied these things. There isn't evidence-based medicine on a lot of this to know. Reminds me of my wife when she was having a baby. They gave her morphine. She said, well, I was drunk as hell, but I still hurt like hell. It affected her sensorium, but didn't cover pain. She liked the epidural a lot better, to tell you the truth. And so there are ways to control pain, but I think we have made a mistake in overprescribing. They say that 4 out of 5 heroin users started with prescription medication. So they became, and certain people are probably more prone to addiction than others, but they got on it, they got hooked, and then they somehow switched to heroin. I guess my question for Secretary Tilley is, we cut down the pill mills, we're cutting down duplicate, but we still have this massive prescription of pain medications. And when I talk to the doctors, they say, well, they've been on it forever, and they're on 4. And they are tolerating. A lot of them are just addicted, and they're tolerating 3 or 4, and they're not dying from it, but it's still not a great life. But we've got to figure out a way. Some of it should maybe come from the medical community that we need to change our, what our recommendations are and how we practice. But do you have a recommendation, Secretary Tilley, on what we've done so far and why we still have counties with 2.8 million doses of opioids being prescribed?
Senator, yes. I was going to mention the same county and those same numbers as I shared with Andrea to my right. First thing, Kentucky is the first state to mandate the use of a PDMP. I think Casper was one of the first in the country to do that. Secondly, we were the first state in the country to limit, based on CDC recommendations, just this past legislative session, Governor dug his heels in on this. It was not easy to limit the prescription of opioids for acute pain to 3 days because the CDC says between 3 and 5 days addiction begins. We're the first state to do that. You got to shrink the size of the funnel at the top to keep these opioid dosages from coming into communities, and that's the first step in that regard. To your point, too, again, I mentioned the book Dreamland only because I think I'm compelled to do it for the notion that I think we were sold a bill of goods, and I'll leave it at that. I think physicians were sold a bill of goods after understanding what morphine could do to people in the day, and now moving forward into the 90s. What is chronicled in this book should be read by everyone that has a concern for this problem. That said, at the University of Kentucky, there's a new protocol to do just what you said, and that's begin with everything but an opioid rather than the opposite. Why begin with a narcotic? Begin with everything to deal with pain, and a narcotic being the absolute last resort. And in a controlled setting, a narcotic can be effective, where it can't be diverted potentially. And that's why the injectables are coming online. At UK, there's 2 patents pending. One is for injectable buprenorphine, but that's a little off, but that's non-divertible, that can deal with the addiction. The second being a mist for naloxone. But that, again, just to say the kind of innovation in the medical community, I think, is to your question.
Here's one quick suggestion. discussion is that, and physicians, as physicians, we don't want to be told what to do too much.
Certainly.
And people need pain medications, and some physicians fear it'll be too controlled and people will suffer with pain. But one of the things you might consider, and I don't know if you've done this, is go to the head of the medical society or the state board and have them go to these counties and just have a meeting with the medical society of 10 or 20 doctors and let them know these are your statistics and that you are outside the parameters. Not put people in jail, but let people know, because I think somehow there could be some sort of persuasion maybe within the medical community, even stronger than just universities. Universities probably aren't as big a part of the problem as, communities are where people are, decades long addicted,
If I could, Chairman, just quickly on that point, I would credit the medical community nationally, but also in Kentucky, for recognizing that the posture was so defensive 5 years ago when we began trying to legislate our way out of this to a certain extent. And today, it's much different. We have done just what you suggested. I think it's an excellent suggestion. We need to do more of that. And that's why you see the medical schools now upping their training requirements for prescribing practices for opioids, as an example.
Thank you.